Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's get right into it, baby.
Let's do it. Okay, so Notre Dame favored by 7.5 as of this afternoon. Do you like them to cover?
I love them to cover. I'll keep it short and simple. UConn and NC State were tied, 7-7, and then it got 10-7 right before halftime off a last-second field goal. I think it's criminal that Notre Dame is only a 7-point favor in this game, 7.5, depending on what book you're on. Me personally, I put $150 on them to cover the spread, so that should tell you how confident I am in that spread.
All right. Stymie says he is confident, but he is not betting on it. Jesse is confident, and he did bet on it. Yeah, I'm 7.5. I think so as well. We're not going to give away our predictions on this show. We will save that for countdown to kickoff, but I am very, very confident. I do have Notre Dame winning by a good shade more than just 8 points. So I'm very confident in that. I think it's going to work out. And again, if you go back to the weather, if indeed it does end up being a rainy day, I think that favors Notre Dame much more than it favors North Carolina State in this game. So good weather, bad weather, whatever. I think it favors Notre Dame. We've got some score predictions that have been coming in here. What about the over-under, 50.5 points? What do you like there?
I am actually not a fan of touching the over-under in this game because of the inclement, chance of weather. Notre Dame can keep the ball on the ground. And then also, to me, Notre Dame's defense hasn't showed me that they're going to give up a lot of points. I know that they haven't played, great offenses or anything like that, but I mean, they're still playing assignment sound. They're still playing fast. And as long as they contain Brendan Armstrong, I just don't see North Carolina scoring a lot of points. And so even if Notre Dame racks up, 38 points themselves and it's 38-10, that's 48 points and we still don't hit that 50.5 point over under. So I'm kind of leaning towards the under right now, to be honest with you, just because of, Notre Dame's defensive presence and the chance of inclement rain, throughout the day.
Yeah. Droop75 says people are underestimating how good NC State is at home. I want, what is it, like 18 of their last 20 they've won at home, but they play the ACC. Notre Dame has won 28 straight games against the ACC, and I just don't buy that, especially for a noon kickoff, as some great hostile environment. Notre Dame has only played there once, and that was in the hurricane 7 years ago. So I agree with what you're saying. If the weather is bad, and I should have thought of that before I placed my wager, but if the weather is bad, you're right. I definitely under 50.5. But otherwise, if it's just, some light sprinkles and stuff like they did see in Ireland, I like this game to go well over 50.5 points.
That's the same thing I felt. But again, I just don't feel comfortable with how good Notre Dame's defense has been, that North Carolina State's going to contribute. And then if you throw in the fact that it might rain, that's going to slow down Notre Dame's offensive production a little bit as well.
Andre saying 56-10. Corey saying 42-17. Old Grim saying 38.
It's a lot of overs.
17. Yeah, that's again. If the weather is good and the weather is cooperating, I think that a couple of those scores, especially like Corey's and Old Grim's, are kind of the ballpark that I'm looking at. But if it gets sloppy out there, then that can change things quite a bit. That's literally a game changer. But I think the weather is going to dictate that. I like the over if the weather is good. So now I just have to hope the weather is good because I've already put my money someplace. Okay, so we were talking about running backs a little bit ago. Just touched on the running backs a little bit. Here's Marcus Freeman on the running back group that he's got.
As far as the running backs room, again, it's a talented room that has a lot of guys that can help us. And I love what Coach Dillon is doing in terms of having certain packages for certain guys and being able to really use all the positive attributes that they have. And so, again, it takes a great coach, but a great room to continue to be unselfish because there's one ball. but everybody's embracing the role and really helping our offense perform at a high level.
So there you go, Jess. My question to you is, do you think the share of carries, the way the carries have been split so far for the running backs, will it change as Notre Dame faces better competition than they've seen so far?
No, I don't believe so. And I think that the reason why I think these early games were a nice way to break these running backs in, I guess you could say a little bit. But Marcus Freeman hit on the head. These running backs have different positive attributes or different skills that they might be a little bit better at compared to the guy next to him in the running back room. And we just kind of talked about it a little bit and what we can expect, out of the Notre Dame offense. If Notre Dame wants to attack the edge, like we said that they were going to, I think you do that with Jeremiah Love. I think you do that with some of your your guys that are a little bit shiftier and a little bit quicker. And then you use someone like Audric Estime to really pound the ball up the middle and between the tackles when it calls for it, right? And so I just think that different situations did call for a different kind of, I wouldn't say running back, but when you have the depth that Notre Dame does and that you have guys who can do different things, you have certain plays that work better for different running backs. And if you're trying to attack a certain part of the field or stretch out a little bit more instead of getting downhill, I think it calls for a different kind of running back. So I don't really see, and especially with Devin Ford out, I don't see that these running backs that their carries are split up really any other way.
I really don't either. I think it's all situational. And you go back to this to the list of jobs that Dylan McCullough has for these running backs. I think it's more about that than it is necessarily level of competition. Now, the jobs can change as maybe the speed of the competition, the proficiency of the defense and things like that ratchet up. But so far, Audric Estime has 29 carries for over 200 yards through 2 games. And then you go, Jeremiah Love has 9 carries. Jabron Payne has 12 carries. Jadarian Price has 6. And we were talking about Devin Ford hasn't necessarily been as big a factor in the offense. He has 2. I still think, I like what Jabron Payne has done. I again, in spots, I think Jeremiah Love and especially Jadarian Price as well, like their speed changes things, but I think it's about what they're trying to accomplish on the given play. And you heard Marcus Freeman talk about it, how the way he is able to sort of mix up different packages for what the play calls for and get that guy on the field. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be dictated by who they're playing. I think it's all just going to be dictated on, what the play calls for in terms of who gets out there on the field. And a lot of it is still going to be, the answer is still going to be Audric Estime because of who he is and his unique skill set. So Michael, like chiming in, coming in hard. He says, stop the NC State defense is really similar to playing Navy, and they are not a highly talented offense.
Well, so I get what he's saying here.
Well, I mean, for one, I didn't say they are really similar to Navy. The scheme is similar to Navy. To me, that's where the similarities begin and end. Like, so, like if you're going to nitpick, I didn't say that they were really similar. There's similarities in the scheme.
Yeah, there's similarities in the scheme. But I think North Carolina State is a very good defense. Last year, they were the number 1 scoring defense in the country. They know how to get sacks. They know how to take the ball away. They're a really good unit. I think the only thing that holds them back this year is they only have 4 returning guys from that defense last year. So even though the formation is the same, they had a really good defense last year. It's going to give Notre Dame fits. It's given Sam Hartman's fits in the past. But Sam Hartman hasn't had the offensive line talent that he has in the past to be able to pick up these stunts from NC State. And I don't think he's had quite the talent in the running back room to relieve the pass game like he has in the past, right? And so even when things were going bad in the past at Wake Forest, he was just told to keep airing the ball out. That's no longer the case. He has a run game that can relieve the pass game if things aren't going well. So do I think that, Notre Dame's going to have a bit of a struggle with North Carolina State defense? Yeah, it's a good defense, and it's fundamentally, the 3-3-5, it works for what they're trying to do. I just think that Sam Hartman with this new line and I would say, toys to play with that running back and wide receiver, it's going to be a much different outcome than what we've seen in the past.
Yep. Going back to the spreads, Bill says Notre Dame's the number 5 team against the spread in college football over the last 5 years. They're often underestimated. Now, I haven't looked back historically over the last 5 years, but remember they were horrible against the spread last year, especially as a double-digit favorite. Now, they are not double-digit favorites in this game, obviously, because as we just talked about, 7.5 was the latest line that I saw. And maybe that's a good thing, because when the spreads were closer, that's when Notre Dame fared much better. It was when they were double-digit favorites last year that they really laid the eggs. So take that for what you will.
Yep.
So USC quarterback Caleb Williams is apparently willing to stay in school if he doesn't want to play for the team that ends up with the first pick in the NFL draft next year. Caleb's dad, Carl Williams, says his son could stay at USC for an extra year if he doesn't like the environment of the team that has the number 1 pick. Here's the quote from GQ magazine. The funky thing about the NFL process is he'd almost be better off not being drafted than being drafted first. The system is completely backwards. The way the system is constructed, you go to the worst possible situation, the worst possible team, the worst organization in the league, because of their desire for parity, gets the first pick. So it's the gift and the curse. So if there's not a good situation, the truth is he can come back to school. End quote. Carl Williams, Caleb's dad. So what do you think of this, Jesse? Caleb Williams might not declare for the draft, depending on who ends up with the number 1 pick.
So first of all, I'm just going to say with a blanket statement, this comment is completely stupid, first and foremost. I'm going to dissect it piece by piece now.
Big breakdown.
In the quote, he says the system is completely backwards. That is completely false. The worst team deserves the best player because obviously they need it, right? So that is not the system being backwards. That's just Caleb Williams that's just him not wanting his son to be put into a bad situation because he's going to be the first overall pick. That leads me to my second point. It doesn't matter if you are, Caleb Williams this season or Caleb Williams next season, you're going to be the top tier quarterback. You're going to be the number 1 pick overall. And so it's going to be a bad team probably drafting you no matter what, right? Unless it's like
that's why they have the number 1 pick.
Right. Unless it's that situation where, the Cowboys drafted Ezekiel Elliott because their starting quarterback was hurt the whole season, but they had a ton of talent. That doesn't happen very often. You're going to get drafted by a team that desperately needs you because you're desperately bad. That's not dependent on the year. That's the facts every single year. And so to me, it just sounds like, Caleb Williams wants his he just wants it all. He wants to be the best player and he wants to go to the best team and have an immediate impact. Well, it's just not going to happen like that. No matter what, you're going to be drafted by a bad team because that's the reason why they're drafting first overall.
And I mean, this is really no different potentially than like John Elway being drafted by the Colts and saying, I'm not going to the Colts. And he ends up getting traded to Denver. And he was saying before the draft, don't draft me because I'm not going to sign with you. And it's no different than Eli Manning getting his dad, Archie, to get him out of San Diego and get him traded for Phillip Rivers to go to the Giants. It's same deal. They didn't want to go to the Chargers. They got the deal worked and he went to the Giants instead. So what Caleb Williams has is a year of eligibility that he hopes to leverage. Like, I wonder if this is actually directed at the Arizona Cardinals, because there's already been this talk about the Cardinals.
It 100% is.
Well, yeah. And they're, like the Cardinals tanking for picks, and look at what they've done. They drafted Josh Rosen a few years ago. They hired, a new head coach the next year, and they let him draft his quarterback. So they went with quarterbacks at the top of the draft a couple of years in a row. And now there's all this talk about, are they tanking to get Caleb Williams? So how much is specific to Arizona, I think, in this whole deal? Because just as you said, no matter what, the worst team is going to get the number 1 pick because they're the worst team. So it's not going to be an optimal situation no matter what. But, just look at what some of these young quarterbacks have done for the teams that they've been drafted by. Like Cincinnati picked very high. Look at what they've done with Joe Burrow already. And, look at the Chargers as an example with Herbert in the same draft. So, yeah, I would be really curious to see if he actually does indeed stay in school for another year, because like you can say, well, he risks injury and all that kind of stuff, which he does, but there's also a heck of a lot of NIL money floating around out there right now that makes things a little bit easier for someone potentially like him who would want to stay in school for another year and still at least make some money before being drafted. So I'd be really curious to see if he actually follows through on this.
Yep. And it just, to me, it sounds like, we know Caleb Williams has been a dedicated to his craft ever since he was a kid, right? Like I remember them talking about it last year that he had a dietitian and all this stuff. And it was, Caleb Williams wanted these things because he wanted to be good. I just think that Caleb Williams and his father fear for a guy that's been great his whole life, that they don't want all of that hard work and everything to go to waste because of a potential spot that doesn't fit, for Caleb Williams at the end of the day. So it just simply comes down to they don't want to go from the best to the worst at the end of the day. But, that's the consequences of being the best player. If you're the best player, you are expected to be able to pull a team out of poverty, essentially.
Yeah. Salty said Williams' dad is waiting on the flip draft when the Super Bowl winner picks first. Not likely. Yeah. And it's like, you also wouldn't take a quarterback because you just won the Super Bowl.
Probably got a franchise quarterback if you're winning the Super Bowl.
That's right. Brett says $3 million a year NIL for Caleb in the article he read, and I've seen around that amount as well. And I mean, if he ends up winning a second Heisman, could you imagine the money that he could cash in on by staying for another year as well?
No, I could not, because it would be a lot of money.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Tony Dorsett, went to our team as the top player. They were already pretty good before Tony, but Tony put him over the top, helped him win Super Bowl 12. Cal Chancellor Carol Chris says the ACC is interested in using Dallas as a place where teams in the new conference could potentially come together to play to minimize the impact of travel for the Eastern and Western schools. What do you think of this possibility? Like, instead of traveling all the way across country, you meet in Dallas where SMU is located, and maybe you play some neutral site games. What do you think of that?
I think it doesn't matter unless for football, it doesn't matter.
It's not going to happen for football.
Yeah,
we're talking about Olympic sports, basically.
I think it's honestly a great idea because of the market that you're in. And then the fact that the only thing that would suck is you would play on a neutral site, but in some of these sports, how much does a home field advantage really, matter at the end of the day? And if you are concerned about travel and cutting down, the taking away study time, homework time from a lot of these players, then I think a neutral ground is a good way to start the conversation and a really good idea to get the brainstorming kind of going amongst these people, because it's a problem, obviously, and you can't just you keep saying it's a problem without proposing anything to fix it. So I like that there is already an initiative and brainstorming going on, and I think it's something that ultimately would work at the end of the day, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I do too. And like, you could potentially send like Cal basketball or women's maybe not the basketballs, just because there's more revenue possibilities, at least with basketball home games, than some of the other sports, but like softball and swimming and some of these different kind of sports that aren't necessarily the revenue generators, where you can send them to Dallas where the weather is good most of the time, and you could potentially have like a couple of games in the same weekend against different teams by playing in Dallas, and you could kill like double up and kill a couple birds with one stone. So I think that it is I think it's an interesting proposal, and it sounds like they're probably going to do this, at least for some sports. And travel is the biggest thing. Again, going back to what you were just talking about with the academics and missed class time and all that kind of stuff, and I think that this could really help some of that because that's like the biggest thing that everyone wants to talk about, is the fact that, okay, you're in California and you're in South Florida, or you're on the East Coast in these different kind of places. So again, it's not going to be for football. I doubt that it would be for the basketballs because, again, at least more revenue opportunities. But for other sports, I think it's an interesting way to potentially do some of this. So, of the teams that lost last weekend, LSU, these three teams, LSU, Clemson, TCU, who do you give the best chance to be a playoff contender?
Yeah, out of those teams that lost last week, LSU, Clemson, TCU, I think the easy answer, and I don't think it's really a dispute, is LSU. TCU has a really bad defense, and I don't their offense. I don't know what to take from because they played Colorado, so that's also probably not a great defense in terms of a national comparison. LSU doesn't have a quarterback that's dynamic. They don't have a quarterback that is a game changer like Watson or Lawrence that they've been spoiled by in the past. I just don't think Cade Klubnik is going to get the job done. And so then you look at LSU, you look at the talent of 4- and 5-star recruits that they bring in. I'm still very high on Daniels at quarterback, and ultimately that's what has me over, LSU over Clemson, is that Daniels is a far better quarterback than Klubnik, and he showed far more flashes of greatness compared to Klubnik. And so, it's a tough matchup the first game of the season to have to play another ranked opponent on the road. But I think LSU will get it together, and ultimately they have the best chance out of those three.
I tend to agree because, for what you outlined just with the personnel and what those teams have on the roster, I'm crossing TCU off. I just don't see it because even last year they won a handful of one-score games and, like 10-point games and those kind of things. Their defense is obviously worse. Their offense is okay. They play BYU, they play Kansas State, they play Texas, Oklahoma, and Houston. I just don't see them coming out of this thing and being a playoff team again. I think that was like a once in a lifetime kind of deal for TCU. Clemson, I don't see any way they're beating both Florida State and Notre Dame this season. And that's what they would have to do. Like, I give them a chance to contend in the ACC still, but in terms of playoff team, no, I just don't see it. LSU, I just give the best chance, even though they've got to play Alabama. Again, you got to remember, it's a non-conference loss that they've got. They've got to go to Ole Miss. They've got to go to Alabama. They've got Arkansas and Texas A&M. So they don't have an easy slate by any means. But just with what they've got, they could potentially lose one game and still get into the SEC championship game. And then you never know after that. So I've got to give LSU the best shot just because the other two, I just don't see it by any stretch. All right, one more question tonight. NFL season starts tonight with the Lions visiting the reigning Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs. How many more Super Bowls do the Chiefs have to win to be considered a dynasty?
Oh, boy. So they are – I wish I would have done a little bit more of homework on this game because I'm trying to remember. I know they have two Super Bowl – or sorry, not on this game, on this question. I was too busy wrapped up in my, defensive notes, offensive notes, whiteboards, etc. But, Patrick Mahomes has won 2 Super Bowls. Remind me how many appearances he has in the last
3 in the last 4 years because they've won the 2. And then remember, they lost to Tampa Bay and Tom Brady in the other one.
Right.
And then the year before last, you had
the
Rams and the Bengals in the Super Bowl. So they've been to 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls. They've won 2 in the last 4 years.
And they've been to 4 straight AFC championships in that stretch as well. So I think if they get one this year, I'll declare it a dynasty. That's 5 straight AFC championships. That's 3 Super Bowls in 5 years and another Super Bowl appearance in that range right now. And listen, they're already borderline dynasty to me as is right now. I think you could almost call them a dynasty knowing that Patrick Mahomes is going to be there pretty much his entire life, I would say, right? Because I would say Patrick Mahomes makes the players around him. Sure, Travis Kelce is great and he helps out Patrick Mahomes, but the majority of those wide receivers are, in and out of the door, right? Like they fluctuate. A lot of guys you really like. Sky Moore is going to play wide receiver tonight. If you could tell me you know what college Sky Moore went to and his background, I'd give you $100 because I don't, right? And so like that's the thing. Their wide receivers are interplaceable with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, and more importantly, with Andy Reid behind being the mastermind behind it, because he's the guy who's drawing up plays and coming up with these concepts. His wide receivers just have to run the route and let Patrick Mahomes do the rest of it. So I just think they're going to be really good for a long time. And I think if they get the Super Bowl this year, I would declare them as a dynasty going for it.
Michael says dynasty is 3 out of 4. Spoken like a Dallas Cowboys fan, Michael, because that's, of course, what Dallas won was 3 out of 4. And that's what I think. I'm trying to think. They would not have 3 out of 4. They would have 3 in 5 years. But the thing is, like, the Patriots were the obvious dynasty because they kept it going for 20 years with Belichick and Brady. But other than them, nobody's done anything close to that. The Chiefs, with their 2 Super Bowls already and 3rd appearance, are really the closest thing they have already. You've got to go back to the Cowboys of the early 90s, the 49ers of the 80s, and the Pittsburgh Steelers of the 70s. The Steelers won, I know they won 4, but I think it was in a 6-year stretch that they got their 4. And then the 49ers took them a little bit longer across the decade, but they were definitely dominant. Denver was an AFC dynasty. They won back-to-back in the night, when at the end of Elway. I think I see what Michael's saying. The fact that they've won multiple Super Bowls, but they're also spaced out a little bit more. So I can't go with Denver. I think I agree with what you're saying. I think if the Chiefs win one more, then you call them a dynasty because there's really no sign as of right now that they're not at least going to get to the AFC Championship game. And they've got the guy who's the best quarterback in the game right now.
For a very long time.
I think definitely if they do it this year, you call it a dynasty. But if they don't do it this year, then it depends, because again, you still have to factor in the fact that they've even been in another Super Bowl outside of the 2 that they've won. There's nobody else besides the Patriots who have been to that amount of Super Bowls in that, kind of condensed stretch here in the last 20 plus years, almost 25 years. So I agree. I think they get the 3rd, then you're going to call it a dynasty. Michael says Chiefs 5 straight AFC championship. That's right, because they lost to the Patriots before that as well. 3 Super Bowl appearances and won 2 of those. I mean, that's already
about 6 AFC championships and 3 Super Bowls out of those 6 trips to the AFC championship.
Yep. I mean, that's already bordering on dynasty right there. So I think if they win one more, it's got to be considered a dynasty.
Personally. Did you place any things for the game tonight, or you just
I have not placed anything for the game tonight. I'm gonna look at some stuff when we get done. Does it start early tonight, by the way? Is it a 7:30 kick, or like when does it start?
Let's check here real quick. Nope, 8:20.
8:20. All right, so we've still got another hour or so.
I placed a multitude of things for tonight's game, but most of it is kind of like some boosted stuff. I sent you that boost that I think everyone should hop on FanDuel. Patrick Mahomes 50 yards, 225 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's easy money for someone like Patrick Mahomes. He averages about 303 touchdowns in his last 3 opening games to start the season. Something I did for a little lottery or a little fun because I had a profit boost. I took a Sky Moore touchdown, an Equinemius St. Brown touchdown, Kansas City Chiefs money line, and Patrick Mahomes and Jared Goff to both go for 250 plus. That was a parlay of mine. I boosted it to like plus 1,800, so like $25 wins almost 450 at the end of the day. So
going hard.
That's my lottery ticket for tonight.
Vince would be jealous. You get to bet $25 on something. All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. And again, IB Countdown to Kickoff, that will we will drop that tomorrow evening. Look for both the YouTube as well as the audio podcast coming out Friday night, since we've got a noon game Saturday. So have a great weekend. Enjoy the game. Hit the like button on your way out. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review on your podcast platforms. And we will talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.